Well, we just left the Audrain Museum, and today we're driving a 1992 Mercedes-Benz 500E. You know, this is one of those, there aren't many classic Mercedes of the modern era. To me, my favorites are the 6.3 Mercedes, the 600 Mercedes, this one, and the little Cosworth. But this one is special because this was built by Porsche.
Exactly, Jay. The tenuous thread that holds this particular episode of Mansions Motorcars together is one of things are not exactly what they seem.
Right.
Because we're driving a wonderful 1990s Mercedes mid-class sedan. However, it wasn't built by Mercedes at all.
Right.
The entire production was handled by Porsche in Zuffenhausen, and Mercedes only painted the body shells.
Right. The interesting thing was Mercedes was going to build this car in-house, but they realized once they had modified the chassis and done some work to it that the wheels were too wide for the Mercedes assembly line at the time. So that's why the car was given. Porsche did all the work on it, and then when Mercedes started to build it, it didn't fit in the assembly line because the wheels were too, it couldn't come down the track. So they just sent the whole car over to Porsche to be built. And Porsche needed the work because Porsche was in trouble. Remember, this is before SUVs and all the four-door Porsches that we have now. That's when they were just building
911s.
911s, and there's only so many of those you can sell to make enough profit to run a big company. So they decided to take on this job. So if you like Mercedes-Benz and you like Porsche and you like German engineering, this is the culmination of all of that. I mean, it's the best of both worlds. You've got Mercedes for the reliability and all that, and Porsche for the coolness and the handling and the suspension. So it's really a fascinating car.
This is an extraordinary car for me, Jay, because the idea of a sort of what they call a Q sedan, it's like a Q ship,
right?
A ship that looks like an ordinary merchant ship, but is actually a warship.
Right. And
this looks like any other Mercedes sedan in Europe. It could be a taxi.
Right.
But it's got this amazing 5-liter V8, putting out 322 horsepower, 365 foot-pounds of torque, and 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. You know, Mercedes has, of course, AMG and all of that has eclipsed this car because now you get them with 600-700 horsepower. I mean, it's hard to imagine, it's hard to believe that 1992 was almost 30 years ago.
Yep.
But tremendous things can happen in 30 years. When this car came out, it was one of the most powerful, best handling sedans you could buy, if not the most powerful. And then Mercedes-Benz realized, oh my gosh, why are we giving this to Porsche? We should build our own version. So they started AMG, and of course, our AMG joined with them, and of course, you got
as
the
they say,
result.
the rest is history.
Right,
but
right.
I think that one of the things that in the story about how this car came to be and how it came to be built by Porsche, which can't be underplayed, is the fact that, yes, it is probably correct that it was difficult to manufacture this car in the established assembly lines, but kind of like Mercedes-Benz could have figured it out. I think the reality is closer to the fact that Porsche was in real trouble and Mercedes wanted to help them out.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing, just as today people think of Formula One teams being at each other's throats, you know, doing everything they can to disadvantage their rivals. But there is a history in Germany of manufacturers helping out other manufacturers for the sake of the industry.
Right.
Mercedes helping out Audi when Auto Union almost went out of business before the Volkswagen Group acquired them. Collaboration between Mercedes and BMW, believe it or not, in the early 60s as well, when BMW was having rough times. So there's a sort of feeling of we are in this together,
right? And
we have to help our brothers, as it were. But I think the result is certainly something amazing. And frankly, when you think about sort of the sharing of intellectual property, as it were, or ideas, I think that some of the Porsche GTs that we enjoy today would not have been possible if Porsche had not done work on this, because they were not in the sedan business.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But it's just kind of a cool idea that Porsche and Mercedes get together to build, well, a supercar that has a little bit of each. You know, you've got, you know, the trouble with the SLR Mercedes McLaren was there was too much Mercedes, not enough McLaren. That's what people used to say. Whereas this is almost the perfect blend.
But I think that considering the fact that the 928 was being developed at the same time they were working on this car for Mercedes, so I think that a lot of what they did for Mercedes in this car probably found its way, some of those lessons, into the 928.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the few cars from the 90s that cost more secondhand than it did new, probably. What were these new? Do you remember? Do you have any idea?
I don't remember what these were new. They were horrifyingly expensive.
Yeah.
However, to your point, when people think about sort of modern classics, and again, it's sort of, can we even speak of something being modern which is 30 years old? But when we think about classics, we think about cars that are 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. But certainly, this is a great example of what becomes a classic. It's about the attributes of value,
right.
The entertainment, the rarity, the importance of what it represented to both Mercedes and to Porsche at the time. And those are the qualities that really make a car stand out for the future.
Most people buy cars on the visual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, Delahaye's, for the most part, it's a 6-cylinder like a Chevy Silverbolt. It's not particularly fascinating engine. It might have multiple carburation, but it's a 6 over it. Nothing, but the styling is, oh my God, crazy,
right.
Out of this world. This is the exact opposite. The styling is, well, it's just a Mercedes, isn't it? No. I mean, it's all under the hood. You know, like the Will St. Clair, which was 1922. It was an overhead cam V8, but the body looked like a Model A. So, but when you open the hood, you went, oh my God. And that was the same thing here. You buy this not for the visual looks, because you could get a Mercedes that looks just like it.
Exactly.
You buy this for what's under the hood and what's under the chassis, what's under the body.
Part of the fun is that it's a car for the connoisseur. You know what you're driving, the people who recognize it know
Right.
what you're driving, but everyone else doesn't. And you're doing it for yourself and for the experience of it, not
Right.
to impress someone else.
And this is the kind of car you could bring home and look sensible to the wife. Honey, I know we've got kids now. I bought a 4-door Mercedes. Oh, well, thank God you've got that sports car thing. Yes, honey, I bought a 4-door Mercedes. Oh, good. Well, then they're safe, aren't they? Yes, it's a Mercedes. And, oh, okay, you can do all that, you know.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing about this car is the fact that it is a Mercedes and all that implies, but with that extra bit of fun built in.
Yeah.
And fun and Mercedes are generally words that people don't use in the same sentence.
Right.
But this is a car that really rewards, I won't say aggressive driving, but entertaining driving.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you can fool your spouse with this. That's my favorite thing, you know, when I go to a car show and the wife is standing there and I said, God, how much in this restoration? About 10,000? Oh no, Jay, not that much. And then I see the guy sweating bullets and winking at me, knowing he's put like $100,000 in the thing, you know.
But $10,000 at a time. So
right? Yeah.
You don't count the receipts as they add up.
Right. Exactly.
And never, ever at the end. But that's one of the things too. You think about value. What value is in a collector car, and what do you get out of it? And I think that here it's quite clear that you get the value in the experience of driving the car, and the fact that there will always be a market for a Mercedes-Benz,
Right.
B, a rare example of a Mercedes-Benz with limited production, and C, the Porsche connection.
Yeah.
So it's hard to think of a way to go wrong, as it were, buying a car like this as a collector.
Right. And you have to remember, back in '92, the most powerful Corvette you could buy, with the exception of the ZR1, was 350 horsepower.
Right.
That was a lot. This is 3 1/4. So it's just 25 horsepower down from just about the most powerful V8 you could get in America at the time. I mean, the Viper had just come out, and that had 400, and people just went crazy. 400, oh my God.
And of course, as you well know, Jay, when it comes to the horsepower wars, I'm not a horsepower guy, I'm a torque guy.
Right.
And this engine has such great matched horsepower and torque that it's everything you can. So here we are at our house for today.
Yeah, where are we going?
We're going to a wonderful property called Beacon Rock.
Right.
And you'll see how it fits in our theme of today.
You know, I've been down this street and I've seen these gates, but I've never seen what's behind it. So this will be interesting. You know, there's so many cool places. Sometimes my socks are knocked off, and other times I go, oh, it's a modern tract house on a nice piece of property. But this is Oh, I love these grounds.
We're
See, this is what I
driving
love.
through a wonderful Frederick Law Olmsted Park.
Here, I love any driveway where I can't see the house from the road.
The great reveal.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
about to have a magnificent reveal.
Oh, look at this, boys. Oh, I love this bridge. Oh my God, this is pretty cool.
And we've turned off the road in Newport, Rhode Island, and arrived in Athens, Greece.
Let's open the hood. Show people what we've been talking about here.
The heart of the 500E.
Yeah, this is the
Wonderful V8
beginning.
engine.
Beginning of the end for engine packages. You know, the old days when we were kids, they get the chrome valve covers and all that kind. Now you just cover everything with a big sheet of plastic. This is one of the first cars I remember that did that, and I just thought, no, it seemed like such a waste. You can't even see that it's a V8.
It's a shame because this is such a wonderful engine and it should be celebrated. Fortunately, today we're now growing out of that period and engines are now coming back into view.
Right, right.
But again, the idea of the packaging of this is also quite fascinating because you can tell that this is sort of the maximum engine that you could put into this space.
Right, right. Well, it's sort of what they did with the 6.3, isn't it? They put the biggest engine they could in the sedan body. But very nice.
So here we are at Beacon Rock. Now, just as the Mercedes 500E is a Mercedes but built by Porsche, this is a house by Stanford White that at first doesn't seem to be much like a Stanford White house.
Right.
In fact, the design of the house is modeled on the Stoa of Attalos.
Of course, the I thought it was the
Athens.
Stoa of Attalos, but then I thought maybe not. But it is the Stoa of Attalos. I don't even know what that
Exactly.
means.
The Stoa of Attalos is or was a walkway in the main marketplace, the Agora of ancient Athens.
Okay.
And today, actually, the building exists as a reconstruction by Americans in the 1930s and exists as a museum today.
Yeah, I remember, and it was a blockbuster for a while, as I remember. Yeah.
The house was commissioned in 1887 by Edwin Morgan, the cousin of J.P. Morgan, and a noted yachtsman who was the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club at the time.
Now that's interesting because there are periods in the history and architecture, Greek stuff and Roman, all the rage. But this doesn't say, because I don't see, of all the houses we've seen a number of mansions, very European, very traditional. This is the first one to sort of break from that, isn't it? Did it fit in with the landscapes around here?
The landscape is the key point, Jay. As can be seen, especially from the viewpoint from Fort Adams across the harbor, this point of land resembles much the Acropolis in Athens.
Right.
So when you see this from a distance, it's as if you're looking across to the Acropolis.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about this house as well, like a Mercedes with the heart of a Porsche, this house shows one face on this side, and on the front side, on the water side, is a completely different one, very much in the mold of Stanford White, McKim, Mead and White, the classic revival colonial home, but this time done with a twist in this wonderful local stone set in edge fashion. So it's quite a departure and not what you would expect from Stanford White in this time period.
And what do you think this would have cost to build back in the late 1800s?
I don't know, but the cost was vast, to
Yeah.
be sure, because they imported all of this marble. They had a lot of local craftsmen and imported craftsmen to do the stonework here. And also, this house is set in grounds designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. And the park that this house sits in is as important as the house itself.
Right, right.
The rolling land, this amazing triple arched bridge going down to the dock where the owner of the house kept his America's Cup defenders.
Wow.
So this is the perfect place for a yachtsman, here on a point overlooking the harbor and all of Newport.
Very nice.
Sitting on 8 acres on Brenton Cove with 2,000 feet of frontage, Beacon Rock is built into a dramatic rocky bluff off the Ocean Drive near Fort Adams State Park. It overlooks Newport Harbor and the Newport Pell Bridge. The mansion has 48 columns and open porches of solid marble. It has a 40-foot deepwater dock, water views from nearly all of its 16 principal rooms, 14 fireplaces, hardwood floors, a roof terrace, and full attic. While the neo-colonial classic form of McKim mead in white can be discerned by looking carefully at the distinctive edge stone facade of the house, it is really inside that Beacon Rock reveals itself for the traditionally luxurious Commodore's home it was meant to be and remains today. Bold dental crown moldings, carved fluted pilasters, raised panel wainscoting, and fully paneled walls of the main rooms give Beacon Rock a firmly serious and substantial feeling, while wide windows bring in the view from all sides. After Edwin Morgan's 30 years of ownership, the house was sold to Captain Marion Epley, a scientist who did leading research in battery development, in 1921. The next owner would be a notable one indeed, Felix de Weldon, an artist best known for his bronze sculpture of the U.S. Marines raising the flag in the Battle of Iwo Jima, made Beacon Rock his home. It came into the current ownership in 1996 and has been carefully maintained and restored for the full enjoyment of the owner and his guests. Every owner has enjoyed the unique setting, combining the dramatic cliffside perch of the house and the equally dramatic sweeping landscape designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, with its magical triple-arched bridge carrying the driveway across the property and extensive waterfront. Now, an interesting point as well, relating to this house, is the fact that we've got our next car, which appears to be something, but is in reality something slightly different. Let's take a look at this one.
This is the tenuous connection.
The tenuous connection
Donald
continues.
always has a tenuous connection between that. I'm curious, to me it's a beautiful Ferrari, but let's see what the tenuous connection is. Well, besides being a beautiful car, it's a beautiful color combination, black with green. This is one of those things I couldn't imagine what it looked like until I actually see it. It looks beautiful on this car.
And beauty is the key to what we're talking about here, Jay. This is a 1951 Ferrari 212 Inter with bodywork by Carrozzeria Vignale, designed by Giovanni Michelotti. And Ferrari obviously has just gotten started in 1948 and came out of the box in 1949, starting to win races at Le Mans. Did very well in the Mille Miglia, but of course, in order to support the racing habit, you have to sell cars to the general public, and in this case, general public being very well-heeled, generally gentlemen, who wanted the sporting aura of a Ferrari, but in a car that was luxurious and beautiful. And Vignale bodied most of the early Ferraris, and this is a car that looks like a very expensive Alfa Romeo or Lancia or a Bentley, but it was not exactly what it seemed, because of course at the heart of this car is the engine.
Right.
Let's take a look.
Well, interesting too, you realize Ferrari did not have, Vignale sold this body to anybody that would pay for it. I have a Cunningham, it's the same Vignale body as this. So obviously Ferrari did not have the clout to say, whoa, you can't, because everybody was trying to make money, the war was over, and you had to export or die.
It was also the fact that Ferrari, like the great pre-war manufacturers, didn't build their own bodies.
Right.
They supplied chassis and engines.
Right.
And so the customers could choose whatever body they wanted. And most of the early Ferraris, as I said, were Vignale, and most of them were designed by Michelotti, who also designed your Cunningham.
And a lot of people would be surprised to learn that Ferrari modeled his V12 after the Packard V12. He was so impressed by the Packard V12 of 1915, 16, that era, that he wanted to build a 12-cylinder car. Now, what size engine we look at? It's small compared to Ferrari V12. Was it maybe 2 liter, 2.5?
It's a 2.5 liter V12, and of course, it's quite interesting that the Ferraris were always named based on the displacement, and they kept that system up until the 1990s. So this 212, the 212 refers to the displacement of each individual cylinder. So you multiply 212 by 12 to get the total displacement.
Right.
And the 212 Inter was the road-going model, the 212 Export being the racing version.
Right.
But this is a racing car. This is the single carb version. The racing engines had 3 carburetors. This puts out 150 horsepower. The racing cars put out 165 horsepower. But as beautiful and elegant as this body looked, this was really a race car.
Right.
It was not terribly refined as a road car. And so the early customers of Ferrari were people who had to put up with a great deal of inconvenience and sort of uncomfortable driving in order to have that Ferrari lifestyle.
Yeah, so many people started their own car company because they got annoyed with Ferrari. Ferruccio, Lamborghini, Peter Monteverdi, you know, Ferrari was going to, the clutch doesn't, why you know, don't drive the clutch, you're stupid, you know, shut up. And then they went into, I think Ferrari started more car companies than just about anybody.
You're right, he didn't care about
No.
the customers who bought the cars, he cared about the drivers who raced his cars.
Right, right.
And even then, the drivers couldn't complain too much, and then they found themselves racing for somebody else.
Yeah.
But this is a car that is not quite what they were to become in the late 50s and certainly into the 60s, when Ferrari built some very, very comfortable Grand Prix cars that were elegant and powerful and fast as well.
You know, I asked Carl Shelby why he didn't like Enzo, and he said he killed too many drivers. And it was true. I mean, when you got killed in a Ferrari, well, okay, next guy, put the next guy in the car and go, you know. I mean, there was not, and they didn't make any money.
No.
I know when Phil Hill drove for Ferrari, I don't think he made barely enough to get to the next race. I mean, it wasn't like today where these guys are multi-millionaires. No, it was a whole different time.
They raced for the glory, and very much like someone who would have bought this car when it was new, they bought it for the characteristics of the car. They probably had one or two other cars that they could drive when this was being repaired. And as you said, Ferrari was mostly about the racing. So a car had to last as long as the race lasted. And after that, you rebuilt it, you replaced it, it went on.
Right.
I think that Enzo Ferrari, above all others, would be surprised that we venerate his cars of 60, 70 years ago, because for him, there was no past, there was only the future.
Right, right.
And in fact, people criticized him often for the fact that many of the old Ferrari race cars were simply destroyed. He had no interest in them.
Right, right.
And he didn't certainly want them to fall into the hands of other people who might race them when they were not competitive and therefore besmirch the name of Ferrari.
Or, horror of horrors, put some other engine in it, a Hemi engine or something else. You know.
Which often happened in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But this is a very interesting car because it's a racing Ferrari in effect in a street body. But the next car we're going to look at is something completely different, because when is a Ferrari not a Ferrari?
Let's take a look.
So Jay, we have here a 1980 308 GT4, which is a Ferrari. However, when this car was introduced in 1974, it was a 308 GT4 Dino.
I always wondered, I knew Dino was Ferrari's son who died quite young. Why did he not call it a, I know it was a Dino because it didn't have a V12. Is that why?
Exactly. When the Dinos were first introduced with the V6 engines, the Dino 206 and then the 246, the idea was that these were engines that were designed for Formula 2 cars. And his son Dino had been working with the Ferrari engineers on a V6 project. And so to honor his son, he gave the cars that name. The other reason, of course, is the fact that he shared that V6 project with Fiat. And so the same V6 went into the Fiat Dino's Coupe and Spider as well. So it was sort of viewed as a separate line.
Oh,
and
I
not
remember
as a
those,
lesser line.
Yeah, the Fiat Dino, because we used to get those in trade all the time when I worked at the foreign car dealership. That was this engine in the front.
Correct.
Traditional transmission, but you know, setup. And they're wonderful cars.
Absolutely fantastic cars. Very much the equal of the Ferrari Dino V6s. What is very interesting is that the successor to the 246 Dino was not another V6 car nor another front engine car, but this, Ferrari's first mid-engine production car and their first V8.
Yeah, and very Miura-like too, the way the engine is set in the back there.
Which is also quite interesting because this is a car bodied by Bertone. Pininfarina had really become the coach builder of choice for Ferrari. This is the first Bertone-bodied Ferrari and the last. Let's take a look at the packaging.
Now,
the engine is really magical in this car.
Did they do Bertone because Bertone had done the rear engine?
Had done the Miura, so they had experience with mid-engine cars in the design.
Let's open it up. Let's see, because this is very Lamborghini-like the way these open. Okay. You know, it looks like it's fairly easy to work on.
The packaging is terrific, and again, it's really a challenge to do a mid-engine configuration with a 2+2 car, because this does have rear seats.
Yeah, I mean 2 plus. It's really 2 plus
Shopping
a half.
bags.
Yeah.
Or one person sideways.
I don't know who you get back there.
Your dog.
Maybe children.
But it's also a beautiful engine, I think. And going back to the Mercedes, that's totally covered up. Here you can see the wonderful mechanicals of this car.
So what do you have here? It appears to be a 4-cam. Is this a 2-valver?
It's a 2-valve, 3-liter, 4-cam engine, V8, and they also did make a 2-liter version of this engine for the Italian home market to save on taxes.
Right.
And the thing I really love about the Ferrari V8 is the sound. You know, as a singer, I respond to sound very viscerally, and this is a wonderful baritone sound, much like myself.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, I see the similarities. Yeah.
Not in the crackle finish, I hope.
Yeah, and the crackle finish, yes, exactly. No, yeah, I mean, we have a 5-speed transmission, single distributor.
Yes.
So I always loved the twin distributors on the V12 Ferrari. So this really broke with tradition in a lot of ways, didn't it?
It did, and it also, going back to the Bertone design, I think that Bertone did a wonderful job, Marcello Gandini, in designing this car, that it's got a great look. You don't see that sort of slightly awkward in the rear haunches mid-engine look that a lot of coupes get. It's very well balanced front to rear. You have a long deck and a short, you have a long hood and a long rear, short rear deck, which is very hard to get in the mid-engine car. But Ferrari was not pleased with the fact that this design was so similar to the design that Bertone did for Lamborghini for their Urraco.
Right, right.
Another V8 car which was competing with this car, and so they never went back to Bertone again.
And I remember there was a lot of, is the V12 dead? You know, Ferrari with a V8, and a lot of purists thought, well, I can get a V8 anywhere. You know, Mustang, Camaro, whatever.
And there's especially a problem in the U.S. because as emissions and safety requirements came on board, for a time, the only Ferrari you could buy new legally imported by Ferrari in the U.S. was the 308 GT4.
Right.
And because the Berliner Boxer was not brought here, the 400 was not brought here, so all of a sudden the big V12 Ferraris were not available in the U.S. and the dealers had a problem selling for this price a car that didn't have a Ferrari badge on it. So in 1975 they decided to badge the cars as Ferrari from then on.
Right, and this must be one of the last carbureted cars, correct?
Yes, it was.
Because I can remember when I bought my Countach, I wanted a carbureted car because I was afraid of Italian fuel injection. So I got an 86 Countach. It was the very last carbureted car, I believe, in America before they went over to fuel injection. And I still have it to this day, and it's a great car.
This is an amazing car, and a lot of people who don't think very much of the 308 GT4 and don't think it's a real Ferrari have never experienced it. And I think that we can make you a 308 GT4 acolyte once you get behind the wheel.
I'm probably one of those people. Let's take it for a ride.
All righty.
Well, it's funny, you know, it may sound sexist, but this is what they used to call a man's car in the sense that it's a very physical car to drive. You need a lot of leg pressure to work this clutch. You're moving a manual transmission. Exactly. You have no power steering. I don't think it'd be hard to sell a car like this today because people would expect everything to be power assisted and whatnot, you know.
And that's one of the great things about the 308 GT4 is, especially driving it today, is that it really is a throwback to the time when the driving experience was all involving.
Right.
You know, you don't drive this car in autopilot.
Yeah, and you know, it's fascinating. For all the things that annoy me about Ferrari, they go away when I get behind the wheel or something like this, because it's only 250 horsepower, which is basically Mustang territory in the period. Yet it's light and it makes all the right noises, and it's a torquey motor.
It's a torquey motor that balance, I think, is the thing that really turns me on about the 308 GT4. I owned one of these cars. I absolutely loved it. I grinned every time I drove it because it just felt so eager and so controlled. You always knew what the car was doing.
Yeah, it's very nice. I have to admit, I'm very impressed with this. It's very nice to drive.
As a singer, I love the sound.
Yeah, and I love the gated gearbox.
It's also quite interesting that, of course, by this time in 1980, the cars were badged as Ferraris finally. However, the vents on the dashboard still say Dino.
Yeah.
Because they were the original ones for when the car was introduced.
I remember he died as a young man, and of course Enzo never got over that and named the car after his son. It's so odd you'd name a car after your son but not put your surname on the...
Well, that's the interesting thing, I think, that when people have the idea that the Dinos were called Dinos and not Ferrari because somehow they were lesser, didn't take into account the fact that Dino Ferrari meant so much to his father, so he was honoring the cars by calling them Dinos. It wasn't the idea he was hiding them.
Right.
And I think that also, as the first of the V8 Ferraris, this car also has a very special place because, frankly, the Ferrari company would not be as well established internationally, certainly in the United States, without the volume that they found in the V8 cars.
And it was funny. I remember when they came out with the V8, there was a lot of poo-pooing going on, and a Ferrari V8 because V8 was American, Right.
They could get away with the V6 Dinos because those were allied to Formula 2 racing cars and that sort of thing. But V8, how dare you?
And it's a traditional V8, right? 2-valve?
2-valve V8, yes. They did a 4-valve V8 later in the 308s.
Is
and
it
this engine
twin cam or
twin cam?
Twin cam. Yeah. Well, I must say, whatever the magic of Ferrari is, this car has it. I mean, the steering is wonderfully light. The road,
so direct.
I mean, the front end drops off so you can see the road. I mean, it really is, and it makes all the right noises. It's very, very nice. And these are still, in Ferrari world, fairly reasonably priced, aren't they?
Relatively affordable, yes. Values have come up quite a bit in the last few years. Again, as people understand and appreciate the dynamics, and also realize that not everybody has to drive a badge.
Right.
And as we've discussed before, and as is reality, it could be in the Porsche world as well. This happens sometimes in the BMW world, where there are people that look only at sort of the star cars.
Right.
And any ones that weren't thought of as stars back in the day, they won't consider now as collector cars as being important. But it's about the experience of the cars. I think people, for me, who sort of diss these 308s, have never gotten behind the wheel.
That's probably true. Yeah, it's like the 944 Porsche. Oh, it's not 911. I
right. And that's also an interesting cross-generational thing. I'm not a big believer in generational shift. However, I think that a younger generation of collectors and drivers can appreciate the cars for what they are because they didn't live through the, that's not a period. Right. The young people that are really into Porsche 944s now just think, wow, these are fun cars to drive, and they're affordable, and they're Porsches.
Yeah. And I love the small steering wheel. It almost feels like a go-kart compared to a full-size Ferrari with a V12.
There is a certainly different characteristic about these cars versus the 12 cylinders of the period, and I think that it would have been really terrific for Ferrari had they been able to offer this car alongside the 12 cylinders when they were new.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the safety and emissions issues that hampered them from doing that.
I guess that's right, isn't it?
Yeah. By the time this car was built in 1980, there were 12 cylinders on offer, but for most of the 308 GT4's life, for many years certainly, it was the only Ferrari sold in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which is quite a dramatic thing.
And what did Magnum PI drive?
Magnum PI, he drove a 308 GTS.
Right. Okay.
The next car that came after this one, the two-seater models with this same engine.
That's right. I keep forgetting this is a four-seater car, which is ridiculous. It's not really a four-seater car, but I imagine you save something on insurance and whatnot.
You do, exactly. It's a 2+2, so it's a family-oriented vehicle.
And 2+2 Ferraris never seem to have the cachet. You just take the rear seat out and the value doubles, doesn't it?
Which is quite interesting because you don't have the same penalty for an Aston Martin,
Right.
which are all 2+2 or 4-seater cars.
Right.
Or frankly, a Porsche. All 911s are 2+2 cars
Well, that's
with those
true,
little
yeah.
rear seats. But people keep them folded down so people forget them, I suppose. So Jay, I think you'd agree with me that the 308 GT4, whether badged a Dino or a Ferrari, is very much a Ferrari.
Oh, yeah,
And
it is.
the home that we visited today, Beacon Rock, is a Greek temple that's not a Greek temple, which is a Stanford White beach house, which is sort of not a Stanford White beach house.
Right.
But it's all those things and more.
Well, I'm very impressed with this car. But I like the traditional steering wheel. It's thin. I hate these big modern thick wheels they have on cars now. I like the dinkiness of it. And what does this weigh? It's quite light. What is this? 2,700 pounds?
I think it's a
Something
little
like
more than that.
that? Under 3,000.
Under 3,000 pounds, and just so, again, so well balanced.
Yeah.
It's difficult to design a 2+2 mid-engine car that actually works, but again, in my opinion, as popular as the 308 GTS and GTB were, this car has better balance with its longer wheelbase.
Yeah. And to me, there's nothing like a gated shifter.
Yeah.
This really just makes it so enjoyable. I'm surprised there's not a lockout on first.
On the reverse.
on reverse.
There's
yeah.
a heavy spring, but there is no
Yeah.
lockout. Yeah. But again, you have to pay attention to what you're doing as you drive.
Yeah, these are something. These are very, very nice. Lovely car. I was always, probably the time I was always still on that all Ferraris are 12-cylinder mode. If I'm going to get a V8 one, I just get an American, you know, that sort of thing. But it's an Italian interpretation of a V8.
Exactly.
Well, this is a fabulous, you know, I am not a Ferrari guy, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I never had any complaints with the cars. To me, I just didn't like the way you were treated as a customer, you know. But I realized those days were probably gone. As soon as you get behind the wheel of this, all those things disappear. It's a fabulous car, and I'm glad I'm able to keep an open mind and appreciate it.
And that's what it really takes to understand the tenuous thread
Right.
that ties all of the cars and this house today, Beacon Rock, together.
Right,
The
right.
fact that what you expect and what you get can be a surprise,
Right.
but a very satisfying one.
Well, this is a very satisfying surprise. I have to admit, it's of the two cars we've driven today, the Mercedes is exactly what I expected because I have an AMG in 2002, and that's 350 horse, 4 doors, you know. So it's very similar to that. This is a surprise because I did not expect this to be as nice as it is, even though it's only 250 horsepower. When the Corvette at the period was 300, 350, you know, but obviously I was wrong. So this is great. I appreciate this.
Another gift of the combination of Mansions and Motorcars.
There you go. Learn something every day.